Morning everyone, Anthony from Showcase, and I'm just going to talk a little bit today about some of the stuff that I keep hearing from small businesses who are still working towards GDPR compliance. And the most common sentence I think I hear is, we don't store any data, so yeah, it doesn't really apply to us. Well, it's driving me bonkers because a business by default serves clients. Clients need to make payments to you. You need to store details about those clients in order to carry out your business with them, and therefore by default a business has to process and store data. So I thought I'd go into what constitutes data a little bit so that people can kind of get more of a grasp on what it actually means. So every business has a legal obligation to keep an invoice or a receipt of payment. Okay, so for legal reasons, you're required to keep hold of those for 6 years if you're not VAT registered, 7 years if you are. And therefore that should contain details or data of the person that you supplied this product or service to, and also a link to where they can find their rights, etc. So um, unless your business has no clients, you automatically have an obligation to store data on those people. So it's slightly different if you're a business to business, B2B business, then obviously it wouldn't constitute personal data, therefore would be less likely to fall under GDPR, but it would still constitute data within your business, and you should really, as a best practice, just make sure that's being secured and add it into your privacy policy to show how you're securing that information. But also things like contracts. So a good example would be a company who does residential lettings, or something to that effect, where somebody would hand sign a piece of paper, then that obviously would constitute data, personal sensitive information, because that's somebody's signature right there, along with their date of birth, their address, their name, potentially forms of ID, those kind of things as well. So even if you are a serviced accommodation company, then obviously you would still need a signature or some agreement in writing that they're going to pay you X amount for this long a stay. Even if that's a third party software, such as Tokeet, something to that effect, then the data will be stored on there, but it's your responsibility as a business to ensure that that is GDPR compliant. Otherwise, you need to switch to a GDPR compliant system. Also things like email inquiries. So whether or not your website has a contact form, which obviously is recommended and has always been standard practice, that your website does have a contact form so people can send you a message. But even if you are providing an email address and somebody can send an email inquiry to that email, then it constitutes data that falls under GDPR if that email, or what happens to that email, it is a concern of GDPR. So most websites would store a copy of that email on the website itself in the back end in a database, so that you have a record of how many form submissions have happened over the last, well, since the beginning of the contact form. But also you would get the email into your inbox, so therefore it's now within the jurisdiction of your business. So therefore, in your privacy policy, you should now be disclosing how long you intend to keep that information, and under what criteria you make that decision. So if somebody asks you, do you do this product or service, and you say no, then you have an obligation then to dispose of that person's information after X number of weeks or days, and that's entirely up to you, but it's recommended that that would be a relevant or justifiable duration, so say 90 days really at a maximum. But also lots of people use CRMs or mailing lists. Obviously mailing lists, sorry, I've got a really bad cold at the moment, but mailing lists has been under a lot of scrutiny, and it's mainly because you can't prove the consent of those people being on that list. But if you do have legitimate consent and you can prove that they opted in deliberately to receive those types of emails from you, then that mailing list, whether that be on something like MailChimp or a more specialist one such as Aweber or ActiveCampaign, the mailing list system itself is quite possibly on AWS, an Amazon web server, which means that it's in the cloud, which means that quite often the data is stored in America. So therefore, there's a distinction between, oh, I've just got it on a third-party system, which I use in my business. You now have to disclose that information may be making its way over to the States, and under what GDPR grounds that is facilitated. So in the case of America, they fall under the EU-US Privacy Shield, which basically means that America have self-certified or declared that their standards of protection are the same level as the UK and their new GDPR rules. So therefore, there's no vulnerability by transferring that information across the Atlantic. But you need to make your visitors, your website users, aware of this information under GDPR rules. So, I mean, there's about 10 different reasons why your business processes information, data, information, whatever you want to call it, the stuff that falls under the jurisdiction of GDPR. So please don't tell me my business or your business doesn't process or store information. It does, 100% it does. I can't think of a single exception to that rule, because a business by default needs customers. If you can think of one, then I'd love to hear it, because then I can start avoiding those types of business. But it's not a rant, it's supposed to be an informative video. So if you've got any feedback or questions as a result, then obviously I'm here to help. And I hope that clears up this we don't store, we don't process information rumor that's going around. So bye for now. I will leave you to it, and I'll speak soon.